My name is Chu Machinye, and I am your family lawyer. It's always a pleasure, a delight indeed, to welcome you to yet another episode of Your Family Lawyer, the podcast where we unpack family law in Nigeria in ways that are practical, personal, and powerful. My name is Chu Machinye, and I am your family lawyer. Before we dive into today's episode, let me remind you to hit that subscribe button so that you never have to miss an episode. If you care about protecting your family's future and avoiding legal pitfalls, this is the place to be. Give us a call today, send us a message, and let us know how we can help you. In today's episode of Your Family Lawyer, we'll be speaking for some of those amongst us who are perennially unable to speak for themselves. We'll be exposing the cultural practices that limit the inheritance rights of our daughters, our wives, and our widows. We're going to explore how cultural norms like primogeniture, and the levirate marriage have historically affected women's inheritance rights. Don't be in a hurry. I will explain these high-sounding words to you in a moment. We'll explain in plain language what Nigerian courts have said about these practices and how we as a society, and especially as families, can protect the inheritance rights of women and clothe them with dignity, surround them with justice. This issue of inheritance rights of women in Nigeria is a deeply personal and persistently controversial topic. Whether as daughters, wives, or widows, women across Nigeria often find themselves excluded from inheritance from their fathers. And this is not by fate, but by a mix of law, custom, religion, and silence. But what does the law actually say? How do the courts rule when tradition says no and the constitution says yes? We'll explore statutory, customary, and Islamic legal frameworks and systems. We'll compare urban and rural experiences, and then highlight strategic cases so that we can equip our women, and of course, men, with the knowledge to claim or defend what is rightfully theirs. Statutory law, perhaps, provides the strongest protection for women's inheritance rights. I say this because under the administration of estate law, when a person dies intestate without making a will, that is, their surviving spouse and children inherit their estates in set out proportions. The wife is treated as a primary beneficiary, not merely a custodian. But of course, this is if the man and the woman were married under the Marriage Act. Under the wills laws of the various states in Nigeria, the laws allow anyone to dispose of their property as they choose, but courts may intervene if a will fails to make reasonable provision for dependents under the testator's family. Then, of course, you know that the Constitution also helps in a great deal. Section 42 protects Nigerians from discrimination on grounds of sex or circumstance of birth. And this actually, to a great deal, nullifies customary rules that exclude women from inheritance. But in practice, this action continues, this discrimination continues. Because under many customary systems, land and property pass through the male line. In Igbo custom, for instance, males are favored, particularly the first son, and this is primogeniture, which we'll talk to you in a bit. Under Yoruba custom, a widow may remain in the house, but rarely inherits a title to the property. Under Benin custom, daughters inherit only in the absence of sons. Such customs are often unwritten, but rigorously enforced by elders and family heads and family members and communities. especially in rural settings. Let's talk a little bit about Islamic law. Uh, Succession under Sharia is clearly defined. A wife usually should get about 1/4 of the estate if there are no children, and 1/8 if there are children. Daughters inherit half of what sons get. Mothers, grandmothers, and sisters may also inherit fixed portions, as may be predetermined by the Sharia law. Though discriminatory in proportion, Islamic law is structured and in a way much better than customary systems that may outrightly and often outrightly deny women any inheritance. For many Nigerian women, the phrase "you are now married" is not just a farewell, it's a condemnation to exclusion, legal exclusion, physical exclusion, and sometimes mental torture, because they seem like they no longer have a place where they come from. In communities like Nnewi in Anambra State, and indeed most of Igbo land, and majority of ethnic groups in southern Nigeria, daughters are not allowed to inherit land. They are told that their husband's family is now their home. And of course, you know that in their husband's family, they really can't quite inherit. This has led to deep resentment and litigation in many cases. But some states like Rivers State have passed legislation to outlaw this obnoxious practice. Let me again there where many men are afraid to go. Wives will make a lot of fuss, perhaps justifiably, about wives being disinherited by custom from their husband's estate. Let me ask, why is it that nobody, and I mean literally nobody, has ever wondered why husbands, in the spirit of fairness and equity, should not be allowed to inherit from their wife's family? Back to the topic of the day. You know that limited inheritance rights can leave female children economically vulnerable. Some of them become destitute. Their destinies are cut short because of lack of access to education, to money to train them. Some female children may be forced to rely on others, such as husbands or male relatives. Of course, some may go into prostitution to earn money to financially support themselves. Now let us attempt to bring these cultural practices to the fore and explain them in plain, easy to understand English language. First, let us talk about primogeniture as a practice in many parts of Nigeria. Primogeniture is a system of inheritance where the eldest son inherits the majority of the properties, titles, or leadership roles in families. In Nigeria, it is practiced in various forms across different ethnic groups. It is prevalent in Igbo culture. The eldest son, usually known as the Okpala, inherits the family property and assumes leadership responsibilities. The Benin Kingdom also follows this system of primogeniture. The eldest son inherits the throne and the property. And by throne, we mean of any kind. Leadership, chieftaincy, whatever it is, it goes to the male child. Other ethnic groups in Nigeria, such as the Ibibios, also practice forms of primogeniture, although the specifics would vary from one ethnic group to the other. What then are the implications of this antiquated practice for the girl child, for women, and for society as a whole? First, primogeniture often determines leadership roles, with the eldest son assuming responsibility for family or for community leadership. Even if he's an imbecile, even if he doesn't know his left from his right, and the elder sister is brilliant and wise, she has to follow him. Then there is the question of property. The eldest son typically inherits the majority of the property. And this can include land, some other assets, and valuable resources to the exclusion of the girl child. Primogeniture can impact family dynamics, with the eldest son often taking on significant responsibilities and expectations, irrespective of his worthiness or capacity for such prime leadership roles. And as you know, most people would relate with this. This often breeds conflict and animosity because he feels entitled to be worshipped and adored by better placed siblings, male or female. This is often so if, unfortunately, he didn't do well in school or has not done well generally in life. He still expects all of his family to kowtow and worship him. Worship him with their money, worship him with respect. Whatever he says is law, even though what he's saying is arrant nonsense. Watching Nigerian movies, and truly it's not too far from reality, where the first child begins to feel so bad about the younger ones that he plots to kill him, or when he dies, he throws the family out of his compound. Now, primogeniture can perpetuate inequality among siblings, with younger siblings potentially receiving less inheritance and opportunities. And these young ones often would not have the same access to resources or to rules in the family. And if their father had died before they could get education, they probably may not have resources unless the first son is kind enough to release money for their training. As Nigerian society evolves, there is of course now increasing scrutiny of traditional practices like primogeniture, with some, including yours truly, arguing for more equitable inheritance systems to be practiced in Nigeria, both in our rural areas and in the big cities. I'm glad to announce that attitudes are changing towards primogeniture, with some Nigerians advocating even for more modern and inclusive inheritance practices. People now begin to understand that being firstborn male doesn't make you superior to the second or to the third. Nigerian laws may influence the practice of primogeniture, particularly in cases where statutory laws conflict with customary practices. We have become quite aware now, if you are following this program, that Section 42 of the Constitution is a veritable tool in the hands of advocates for equity and fairness. And in customary practices and traditions, people are beginning to poke at these practices, ask questions, challenge the order of the day so that society can be fairer. Primogeniture, if you ask me, is an important aspect of Nigerian cultural heritage, particularly in certain ethnic groups. However, let's be clear that its implications and challenges highlight the need for ongoing discussions like what we are doing, and then adaptations following the discussions to ensure fairness and equity in inheritance practices. We have taken time to explain this concept in details because, in our considered opinion, it is at the heart of cultural discrimination against women's rights to inheritance. There is frankly speaking, no reason why a younger son should inherit his father's properties over and above his elder sister, simply because he was born with male genitals. If you think otherwise, I would like to know. Now let's talk a little bit about the stigma that this causes. Widows often face societal stigmatization and marginalization, limiting their access to inheritance. Now, it also happens that this can lead to limited education and economic opportunities for women. When you limit the access to finance, you limit the access to education, you limit the access to opportunities, and it becomes difficult for them to assert their rights because you need some form of resource to be able to access, to fight for your rights. At this point, let me remind you to click that subscribe button if you think this is meaningful to you. Please share it to some other persons who might benefit. There is, of course, the big challenge of in-laws grabbing properties from deceased husbands and families, leaving the widows a lot of times with absolutely nothing. And this is condemnable, not acceptable. One of the reasons why this practice persists is what I've referred to external forces, such as relatives or community members, who may also want to grab property from a vulnerable widow and her young children. As husbands, note this and be wise. Take measures whilst you are alive to protect your wife and children. It is good to trust your siblings. I trust mine. But whilst trusting them, it is good to protect your immediate family so that you don't die. And, if dead people regret, you'll be regretting from wherever you may be. If you fail to do so, you leave your wife vulnerable, and she and the children may face poverty and hardship, which they were not accustomed to whilst you're alive. Women who are excluded from inheritance experience social isolation, marginalization, emotional distress, and trauma. And sometimes they are forced to do those things that you know your wife wouldn't do. Don't ask me, because if you ask, I will answer. Many widows have been forced into prostitution. You see those friends that you trusted, those brothers you trusted, they now want to sleep with your wife. Why don't you prevent this by protecting her? Take those steps today. Join in this campaign to stop the practices that are distasteful. If you're watching me and you're thinking that all is well and that you have done enough to protect your wife and children, so be it. But then pass this message on. Share this with some other person. Tell them the truth. That there's a need as a society for us to stand up against these practices. It's not too far from you. If it didn't happen to your mother, it might happen to your wife. If it doesn't happen to your wife, it may well happen to your daughter. The time to speak out, the time to do that which is right is now. If you need legal consultations or advice, please place a call today by dialing the number on your screen or send us a WhatsApp message.